Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's InfoBurst webinar. As always, we appreciate you all taking time out of your busy days to join us and learn about InfoBurst. And today we'll be talking about new features and enhancements in the just released InfoBurst 2023.1 version. So with that, and thank you for taking time out of your Valentine's Day to join us. Happy Valentine's Day. Yeah, thanks for the message there, John. So as I'm presenting, if you have any questions or comments about the features you see, please feel free to put that into either the Q&A panel or the chat panel. Either one is fine. Today's webinar won't be too long. We've got a nice set of features to review, but it should go pretty fast. So at the end, as always, we'll open it up for questions. But we seem to have we might have a little extra time today. If you want to ask a question about a topic we didn't discuss today, that's fine. If you'd like to discuss a feature, a challenge, anything like that, we'll try opening it up for discussion at the end. So let's get started. My name is Bryan Baca. For those that don't know me, my role at InfoSol is product support manager, and I focus mostly on the InfoBurst platform, support, pre-sales, QA development. And we have a team of folks here that are working hard to bring you this platform. Okay, so today we're talking about 2023.1. It was released this morning. Happy Valentine's Day. That's our gift to you. And this release is a little bit early in the cycle. And as we'll talk about in a moment, the main focus of this release is support for a new BusinessObjects version that we understand folks are moving to, and we wanted to get a supported version out as quickly as possible. As always, you can find details about InfoBurst version releases under the release notes forum on the InfoSol help desk, and I thought we'd just head over there and take a quick look. For those of you that aren't aware or familiar with the InfoSol help desk, it is a public resource. You don't have to have an account or be signed in to view our documentation called solutions or the forums. But if you're utilizing the help desk for things like support ticketing or software access, you will need to be signed up and have a valid account. So to look at the release notes for the current version, the new version, and all previous versions, just head over to forums. And then right here, the first forum is InfoBurst, and here you can see the release notes forum, and within that, you can see release notes for every version. And we know we have users sometimes that are updating from old versions, maybe several years worth of versions past. And so there's lots of changes, lots of features, lots of bug fixes. You can get all the details in each of these release notes. And like I said, today we're going to be looking at 2023.1. All the information that I'm giving you in the webinar is also covered in the release notes in more detail, and also with links to the supporting documentation within the help desk for those features and enhancements. So I do encourage you to head over and review those when you have a chance. And again, as always, that includes links to bug fixes. So each one of these is going to be an issue that we discovered or was reported to us that we have addressed in this version. So you can click on each of these links to understand what the issue was and if it might affect you. And obviously, these are all fixed in this current version. Okay. So in terms of enhancements and features, let's talk first about BusinessObjects. So second week of December, I believe, SAP released BI 4.3 SP03, and InfoBurst 2023.1 provides official support for this version. I will say, as always, we encourage you to stay current with your versions. We know that's not always practical. We know organizations will have to go through sometimes an involved QA process. So if you are looking for 4.3 SP03 support and you are not in a position to move to 2023.1, we can support you on the prior general release version, which is 2022.4. But if you're not on 2022.4 and you need SP03 support, don't go to 2022.4, go to the current version, which is 2023.1. That way we can provide you the support on the most up-to-date version of our software. All right, so let's talk about Power BI. More and more of our users are leveraging Power BI alongside their business objects reports. Some are leveraging Power BI exclusively. The product is evolving. This is very new functionality. And as we see new requirements and new challenges with our users, we're trying to adapt the product to provide solutions. So a feature that was introduced in the last version, 2022.4, was the ability to add a native Power BI dataset to InfoBurst for purposes of scheduling. So users, instead of using the basic scheduler in Power BI, want to leverage the more advanced scheduler in InfoBurst, event-driven scheduling, macro-driven scheduling, things like this. And so we added the ability to add the data set and then use our scheduler to execute the refreshes. The last version did not support refresh status, which is introduced in this current version. So now you can schedule the data set and know the status of that refresh, success or fail, which would then maybe trigger you to set up abort notifications and things like this based on status. We've introduced support for filtering on Power BI reports. And again, as a reminder, InfoBurst supports both Power BI reports, which are more like dashboards, if you will, and also Power BI Paginated Reports, which are more traditional types of reports like WebI or Crystal, right? So this is a Power BI report, which we do support filtering, and we've added support for date filtering. I underline the date format there on the right because while we support date filtering, do know that Microsoft requires the date values to be submitted in that format, MM-DD-YYYY. This is also documented on the help desk in the article regarding bursting, and John has just corrected me. It's actually YY-MM-DD. So we'll get that corrected up on the help desk as well. So thank you for that, John. He's our developer. So just know that you have to have a specific format if you're filtering on dates on a Power BI report. Also, regarding Power BI report filtering, there are some nuances that we want to communicate to you. If you're going to be working with Power BI reports, these might help you make some decisions about how best to filter. So a Power BI report is based on a data set, and that data set might be a data set that was created natively in Power BI, meaning maybe you connected to a database or uploaded an Excel file, but it wasn't created by InfoBurst, right? Then there is a Power BI report that is using a data set that was created by InfoBurst, because remember in the first bullet point, InfoBurst can, well, actually, no, I'm sorry, that's not related to the first bullet point. Another feature of InfoBurst related to Power BI is the ability to deliver data sets to Power BI. So InfoBurst is actually the engine that's producing the data sets, maybe from a database query or a web intelligence report or something like this. So there is a nuance there that I want to talk about related to the data set underlying the report and filtering. So let's go into InfoBurst. Let's start over here. So in the Power BI portal, I have, this is just a little sample Power BI report. And what I want to point out over here on the right is this data section, or depending on your version of Power BI, called fields. And this is basically the tables of data in the data set and all the variables in that table. So here we have a table called records 100 and all the variables. This is important. You have to understand or have access to, if you're going to filter a report in InfoBurst where the data set didn't come from InfoBurst, you need to be able to come into the report and identify two key pieces of information, which is the table name and what's called the field name. And with that information, let's go back over to InfoBurst. I've got a burst here. And what I've done is I've added two different reports from Power BI. The first one, sales by region, uses a data set that wasn't produced by InfoBurst. In this scenario, we can filter. So I'm going to click on filters. and we'll say add filter. And we've discussed this in the past. Unlike other report types where you can select from a list of variables, maybe you want to filter on state or city or region, like with Web Intelligence, you can select a value. That's because the platform, in that case, BusinessObjects, provides the ability for InfoBurst to get that list through what's known as their SDK. That is not possible currently with Power BI. That's not a feature of their SDK. So you have to know these two bits of information. So what we've done here, if you're already using InfoBurst with Power BI reports and filtering, we've enhanced this filter UI where we tell you what we need. We need the table name, we need the field name. There's a little help icon here. So if you click on that, this is just a reminder to the user where to locate this information. And that's what we just looked at in Power BI. So there's the table name, records 100, and there's the field name. So we need to provide those two bits of information to apply the filter. Now there is a note here. We put it in red for a reason. If the table name or field name are incorrect, then Power BI will not filter that data set and you will get everything. So if you're working with this type of report, I highly encourage you to test the output, make sure you've got the table name and field name correct before actually executing a burst in production. So here we would say region 100, and then we're going to filter, let's say, by country, right? So table name, field name, that's our filter. And then we can go on to either type in values manually or apply any of InfoBurst data sources. So that's a Power BI report where the data set did not come from InfoBurst. In 2023.1, we have added the ability, well, a feature that says if the report uses a data set that InfoBurst produced, and InfoBurst can know this when we add the Power BI report to InfoBurst, we can look at the data set and its metadata and know if it came from InfoBurst. And if it did, if we apply a filter or add a filter for that report, add filter, you'll notice here we have that handy dropdown. This is because InfoBurst built the data set. It knows the table names, it knows the field names or variables, and it can present them as a list to select. So just know that this is an option. This will maybe make creation of bursts around Power BI reports a little simpler, meaning just select a value, and also reduce the scope for error in maybe typing in the table name or field name incorrectly. So know that you have this option, and that might influence your decision on whether to use InfoBurst to manage the data sets that underlie your Power BI reports. Okay. All right. All right, so that's Power BI. Let's move on to enhancements around the burst. Okay, so the first change is the addition of a preview option for email delivery, specifically the message field. So within the message field, let's say you're sending PDF files from a Tableau workbook or something. You can optionally add a message that will appear in the message field of the email. And within that, you can leverage HTML tags to format the message. The challenge with this, and let's just go over and look at it in the user interface. Let's go here. Right. So I'm going to go in. I've already created a delivery. And as some of you may know, if you want to achieve message formatting, line breaks, hyperlinks, text formatting, images, that sort of thing, you can leverage a simple HTML tags. But the only way that you could actually test this would be to either send the messages to yourself to make sure you got the HTML formatting correct, or you might leverage our test email feature, which produces the message, and then you can go look at it in another section of the UI. Now we've made it a little bit simpler to preview the message. So if I've leveraged HTML here, which I have, just a little bit of sample formatting, I can just select the preview tab, and now I can see my formatted message. So we're hoping this makes life a little easier if you're trying to achieve special formatting in your messages. Like I said here, we've inserted a bulleted list with HTML tags. I've got a hyperlink in my message. I've linked to an image out there on the web, and a little bit of text formatting. Also, for the burst, if you're using Web Intelligence, we've added a search option when using the BusinessObjects LOV for a selection of parameter values. So let's go back over to that same burst. And for this Web Intelligence report, it does have a parameter. And so if we want to select values from the default list of values from BusinessObjects, we would click on this LOV button, and that launches our macro builder. And within that, we display the list of values. This comes directly from BusinessObjects. That's not produced by InfoBurst. And the idea here is that a user can come in and just pick the values they want to apply to this parameter. So because these LOVs can be lengthy, we've added a search option. So you simply click the magnifying glass icon, and then we can come in here and let's say I want New York. So I'll just type in new and hit enter, and it will filter for just that value. We can add it. Maybe I want to show all. Maybe I want to search again for Florida. Right. So a simple search to narrow down that list for selection. Other changes in the burst. Previously, this message field was limited to 2,000 characters, and if messages were over 2,000 characters, there were some special features that you could leverage an external file to pull in large messages. We realize that's a little bit cumbersome, so starting with this version, we've abolished that 2,000 character limit in the user interface, so you can put in your larger email messages. That applies to both the burst and the memo, which we'll talk about in a moment. And also on the BusinessObjects side, we've always supported a destination of BusinessObjects Inbox, but in this version, we've added support to pull that BusinessObjects user list from a data source, from a data context. So if I'm using, let's say, an Excel file to drive my bursting, and that Excel file also has a list of BusinessObjects users, we can pull it from a source. That's what data context means. And then also we've introduced support for defining the inbox recipient as a BusinessObjects user group. So instead of adding a name, you can add a group, and then that message gets sent to all, or that delivery gets sent to all the inboxes in that BO user group. Okay, let's move on to the memo. And this is the same enhancement, but for memo, the ability to preview message specifically HTML formatting. I'm going to show you this again because there's another nuance of this new feature that I want to show you. So let's cancel out of this. Let's start here. So this doesn't just apply to the memo. For those that don't know, memo is a fairly new object type that allows you to generate emails from InfoBurst using a data source, data-driven emailing. So I have a table out there somewhere that's got recipients, and you see right here, I've got a table. My list of recipients is in the first column, and what I'm doing is I'm pulling the message for each recipient from the message column. And here I've chosen to include the message formatting in the source. Again, the source could be Excel, database table. Here I'm using what's called a multi-column list. So you can see here that I've formatted the message in the data source, right? There's all my HTML tags. So with that, I'll come over to the memo, and I've already created this. And if we go into the email delivery, what I've done here is I've said, okay, the email message per recipient should come from the message column. This is a placeholder. It's called an extra column macro. That's the % message. This is just telling InfoBurst, go look in the message field for that value. And this is how we got it, right? So InfoBurst knows that there's a column for email in that source. There's a column for message. So that's just a placeholder. Now, we're not, unlike the burst example where we had the message in line, this is sitting over in our data source. If that's the scenario, we can still preview it. So if you come to the preview tab, you'll notice we still see the macro, the message placeholder. But if we expand the preview, we can now see a preview of the formatted email message from the source. Now, the first row in that table was my address, and it had an unformatted message. This is a message for Brian. But in the second row, that user had a fully formatted message with HTML. So if I hit next, InfoBurst is going to go to the next row in the source, and preview the contents or the contents of that message. And again, here's that same nice HTML formatting for the message. So you can preview in either the burst or the memo the message formatting in line where you've typed it into the delivery, or you can preview it coming from the data source. And this is more powerful because if I'm delivering to a large group of recipients, I can customize each message in the source, special messages, special formatting, all that good stuff. Okay, let's move on to Discover reporting. Discover, which is InfoBurst system reporting, was introduced in 2022.3. We enhanced it in 2022.4 to add the ability to schedule Discover reports. So I want to send to myself as an administrator, let's say a daily report on jobs or bursts aborted for the previous day, something like that. So V1 was reporting, V2 was scheduling, and in this latest version in 2023.1, we've enhanced it further to support use of a template to define the delivery destination for the Discover report. Before, it was just I can create and customize my report, I can schedule it and deliver it to myself in email. Now you can define a template which allows you to deliver the Discover report to any supported InfoBurst destination, email, SharePoint, network folder, and so forth. So let me show you that in the UI. We'll come over here. Again, Discover is located under System and Discover. So I'm going to get rid of this. Let's just do that. Okay, so let's say I'm going to come in and I want a report that shows me a aborted burst for the previous working day. Okay, so I want the burst supported between report. And here I'm just going to run it to preview the report. Actually, let's run that because I want to see yesterday. So let's change the parameter here. I'll just kick this back to yesterday and we'll run it again. So yeah, I had a job that aborted yesterday. Okay, so I've created my report in Discover and now I'm going to save it. It's going to give it a default name and description, and that's fine. I'll just leave that there. And now we're in my reports where I've got my saved bursts aborted between report. And now I'd like to schedule that. So I'll click the schedule button. And like I said, I want a daily schedule. I want to run that Monday through Friday. Let's say we want to run it at 6 a.m. Now I have parameters to deal with. So I have a start and end date where I want to run the report for not the previous day, which would be today minus 1D. For those of you that aren't familiar with macros and their configurations, you can drill into the macro builder here and it explains all the different options for achieving dates with macros. So here, I want the previous working day. So if this were a Monday, I don't want a report for Sunday. I want a report for the last working day, which was Friday. So I would use the -1K. K means working day, not just day. So I want that for both of these. So I basically run the report for yesterday. And the addition here is the new delivery tab. So if I click on that, by default, it's telling me it's going to send the report to my email address. But if we'd like to override that with a template, we can. So here in my templates folder, got a number of templates. And here I've got one that's delivering the Discover report, which is Excel format, out to a SharePoint library. So I can select that and add it. And now we can deliver our Discover report to that custom destination. So Discover reporting with a schedule now supports a delivery template. So we'll save that. Okay, on to various enhancements at the system level. First off, and I tend to get excited about features that other folks may not see as too exciting, but I think this is a useful feature for administrators because more and more of our users have subscription licenses and subscriptions get renewed on an annual basis. So that means at least once a year, you're having to come in and touch licensing in InfoBurst. And up until now, anyone that's managed licenses in InfoBurst knows that you have to have access to the server where InfoBurst is installed, so remote desktop access, and you need to fire up a license program and go through several steps to to switch out licenses. So it's a process that involves server access. So we've now eliminated that need in 2023.1 with license or user interface based license management. It's the exact same process, but you no longer have to touch the server to manage your licenses. Now, before I show it to you, you can still use the license program on the server. It's still there. It's not going away. But this hopefully will make your life a little bit easier when it comes to standing up, let's say, a new repository and applying a license, or switching out an old subscription license for a new one. So if we come over here, this is pretty simple. We're already in system. And if we go to configuration here under license, it's all pretty self-explanatory. As you know, if you're requesting a new license, you need to give us an IID file, and then from that we generate a key and send it back to you. You can just click that button and it'll download the file right to your desktop, and you just send that to us. Then when we send you that file, you just select the choose file button, you go out and browse for that file and apply it. Super simple. Then that replaces any existing key if you have one. And then, as you know, if you apply or change a license on the InfoBurst server, you have to restart our service, which is also on the server. Once you change a license here, you'll have a new restart InfoBurst button, and it will restart the InfoBurst service right from the UI. So, in terms of license management, now there's no need to touch the server at all. Applying a license, changing a license, restarting the InfoBurst service to make that or to apply that change can all be done right from the user interface. Okay. This is just a little subtle feature that we hope will make working in InfoBurst a little smoother. We've added a search function to what we call our browsers. Actually, let me just show you that in context. It'll make more sense. So a browser means, for example, let's say I want to browse a platform. A platform is a connection to a source environment. It could be SharePoint, BusinessObjects, Power BI, Tableau, you name it. When I'm, let's say, adding a document, I'm looking at the platform browser. So here's all my platforms, and let's say I want to go look on the BusinessObjects server for a report where maybe I have a folder with lots of documents in it, and I just want to search for keyword, let's say, sales. So here's all the documents. Now you'll see a little search option here on the top right, and I'll just type in the word sales, hit enter, and it will filter down that list for just those objects containing the keyword sales. I can do the same thing when using what's called the network browser. So instead of browsing a platform, I am browsing network folders. Same thing applies. I can come in, let's say I want to go into my Excel folder and search for just keywords, let's say states, like that. So same feature. Again, we acknowledge that users are going to have folders on source platforms and folders that are very long and hard to scroll through, and that's why we've added the feature. And then you can also do this with what we call the repository browser. So for example, if I'm here in a burst and I want to add a document, that invokes the repository browser. So when I open that, now we're looking at a list of items in a folder in InfoBurst. And the same applies. I can go up to a folder and say, just show me items with keyword summary, enter, and there you go. So very simple search feature. Again, should make your life a little bit easier when we're looking at folders with lots of items or objects in them. Right, so let me show you. So that the bullet point there is navigation bar message option. What that means is that I'm going to log out here. Let's log out. Okay. So some of you utilize what's known as basic authentication or InfoBurst authentication, which means when you browse to InfoBurst, you're presented with a login screen, right, where you put in your username and password. And by default, we put out what's called a login message. I think it says welcome is the default message, but an administrator can come along and put anything they want in there. Maybe they're going to identify this as your production environment or your test environment. So they might put a label there so you know which one you're looking at without having to remember what the URL is. So that's there if you're working in basic authentication. But many of you leverage what's called Windows authentication or single sign-on, where when you hit the InfoBurst address, you're just logged in. You don't see this login screen. And so what we've done in that scenario, and I'll just log back in, is given you the ability, or the administrator the ability to display a message right here in the nav bar. So we have some users that will have 2, 3, 4, 5 different email servers representing test and QA and development and that sort of thing, where at a glance, they'd like to be able to identify where they are, right? So if I come in here, system configuration, here under general, we have a new item called, nav bar message. So maybe I want to call it the same thing. I'll call it dev sandbox. So when I save that, now that message is displayed right here in the navigation bar. This was actually inspired by one of our consultants who was working in a customer environment who they had multiple InfoBurst servers, and she was having to switch between them, and she was struggling to figure out, which environment she was in. So hopefully, again, this will make life a little bit easier in terms of identifying InfoBurst servers when you have multiple servers in your environment. Another system change. This one's to the platform type of business objects, and there are a few things I want to talk about here. First is the enhancement, and then we're going to talk about this. So, and I see the questions come in. I'm going to come back to those at the end. Okay, so for when you're creating a new platform to connect to business objects, it can be a little complicated because you have to know the name of the CMS server. Well, in some scenarios, know the name of the CMS server. And then if you're working with a custom port, you'd have to know how to do that. And if you're working with SSL in business objects, you have to know to do that. So there were all these different combinations where you had to know how to enter the address in the platform user interface. We acknowledge that can be cumbersome, right? So we've tried to make that as simple as possible. So let's switch over here, and we're going to come back to this slide. So let's come in here. We'll go to platforms and say new platform. So the change here is that instead of having to enter an address where, if the port's custom, like I said, or SSL, you have to do special things in that field. Now we've separated everything out. So hopefully it's easier to say, okay, this is the name of the server that hosts what's known as the BI Platform RESTful Web Service. This is how we talk to business objects. So let's just say that server name is called prod, for example. Actually, you know what? I'm going to use my actual server here as an example. So my test server is called dev BI42. And I happen to be using a configuration of business objects where this business objects RESTful web service is hosted on this what's known as the CMS server, which is dev BI42. The default port is 6405, but now if the port is custom on the BO side, you can just put that in the port field. You don't have to form a URL here like you used to, right? And then if business objects is also using SSL, you just check the box, and we're going to amend that to the requests that we make. Now, you may have noticed down here at the bottom, as I'm typing things in, we're forming a URL, which is actually a hyperlink to the RESTful Web Services endpoint that is often used when we're trying to connect to a business objects environment for the first time. We use it to test to make sure our web service is turned on in business objects. Is the port open in the firewall, right? So now we form the URL as you put in that information, and then you can click on it, and it's going to open it. Actually, you know what? Mine is not SSL, so let me uncheck that. So if I click on that, it opens a new tab where we actually browse to that address, and I can see that, yep, this is the response that I expect from a server where web services are accessible and running. So hopefully that will make creation of new business objects platforms easier, and might also service this next bullet point. So we have learned from SAP that, well, let me go back. Up until now, up until current BI 4.3, most of our users, and we've got hundreds of customers that do this, what's known as BIPRWS or RESTful Web Services was hosted on the CMS server. Starting in BI 4.3 SP02, BusinessObjects automatically deploys BIPRWS and Tomcat as well. And we have learned that SAP is promoting the use of Tomcat hosted web services over CMS hosted web services. So we'll support either. You can, wherever you're hosting your web services, we can connect to them. But when we're talking to a Tomcat server, typically we are using SSL, or BusinessObjects is using SSL, and you are likely using a custom port. So the push of Tomcat web services by SAP and the nuances of ports and SSL drove us to make these changes to try to make that definition just a little bit easier, and then testing it to make sure that, yep, InfoBurst can actually get to it. It's not blocked and that sort of thing. Okay. Okay, so yeah, that's everything in terms of features and enhancements for 2023.1. As always, we record these webinars. You can go back and watch them again. You'll be able to review today's webinar later today or tomorrow. All the past webinars are listed on the site as well. You just go to help.infosol.com, go into the forums, and you'll see webinars there. And there you're going to see all the YouTube videos for all the past webinars. As always, do try to stay in the know about new versions. The best way to know that a new version of InfoBurst has come out is to log into the help desk, the help.infosol.com, go to the announcements forum, and just click the follow button. If you do that, you're going to get an automatic email every time we release a new version, as you would have gotten today when we released the announcement of 2023.1. You'll get an email message saying, hey, brand new version, and that's your trigger to go off and start your, hopefully, your QA process. And as always, we have a LinkedIn group where we communicate all this information. Users are interacting there as well, so it'd be nice to have you join. Okay, with that, let's first look at the questions. Okay, I don't understand that. Okay, let's see. Question from Kirk. For the BI inbox by group, does this also work for email by BO group? That would be cool. I don't quite understand that question. If you can clarify or just shoot us a ticket and we can talk about it there, I'll be sure to get that question answered. Those changes were actually made for Kirk's organization, so we can have that discussion. Tom asks, can you change the color of the title bar? I think you're talking about the InfoBurst user interface. No, nothing about our user interface is customizable. That's all fixed. Okay, that's that for questions. Let me just go back and check the comments. All right, Dragon says, we use many API data connectors. Would be good if InfoSol provided some assistance with APIs. Are there any plans to provide help in this area? Dragon, if you would reach out to us with a ticket on the help desk, we do provide options for leveraging an InfoBurst API. We don't publicize any of that, but if you reach out, we're happy to provide you some guidance. Keith says, thanks for the ability to name the platform. Do we also have the ability to change the color red of the banner? Also, so there's a second request regarding what I consider UI customization. As always, please, if you've got ideas for enhancements to the product, and most of the enhancements you saw today were inspired by users, the way to do that is through our user influence forums. Let's go back over here. So help desk, infosol.helpdesk.com, come into forums, and here you're just going to see, if we scroll down, user influence, and here you can see all the different ideas that users have requested. Please, if you're going to post to this forum, be as verbose as possible, be as technical as possible. That's going to help us to understand what it is that you are proposing, and this helps us to evaluate whether the feature is A, feasible, and B, a good fit for the platform, a good fit for the community. As you can see, we do take on lots of enhancements. If you attended our last webinar that was a 2022 year in review. We talked about the fact that, since we moved to 64-bit in 2021, we've added over 150 new features. So it's a very active platform. Regarding the UI request, if you come over, put that in here, we're happy to take a look at it, right? Okay, so that's it for questions. I don't see any more comments. Like I said in the beginning, we're 40 minutes now. I'm going to leave it open for maybe just another minute or two. If anyone would like to ask a question not relevant to the topics discussed today, I'm happy to answer those. Actually, maybe what we'll do, I don't know if it's up yet. Let's go take a look. InfoSol. There it is. Okay, sorry, I'm just checking the questions and comments again. I thought I'd just take the time to promote this year's IBIS event. It's at the Ritz-Carlton Dove Mountain in Marana, Arizona, which is just north of Tucson. The conference was held there last year. It was a beautiful venue, beautiful conference. If you've never attended an IBIS, IBIS is a business intelligence conference that InfoSol has run for the past several decades. Discussion of BI, reporting, dashboarding, user case studies, that sort of thing. And we always talk about InfoBurst at these as well. So if you're planning to attend, we've got a date, we've got a location, and if you go to attendibis.com, you can learn more about that. Thank you for the link, John. So, okay, I don't see any more questions or comments, so I'll let you get back to your busy days. Once again, thank you for taking the time to attend today. The video of today's webinar will be posted later today or tomorrow, and you will get an email notification as part of your registration on events.infosol.com with a link to that video. And again, if there are any follow-on questions or comments, reach out to us, help.infosol.com. We're happy to help you with any issues you're facing or any questions. So thank you again for attending, and have a nice Valentine's Day.